participants. Welcome you all in our online faculty development program on physics. We are going to start our session. Before that, let me introduce to our today's speaker. Is Dr. Arun Pratap sir. He is a professor at MS University, Baroda. He will give a lecture on the analogies in physics. Thank you very much, sir, for sparing your time and handing over to you, sir.
Basically, I will be talking about different analogies in physics or in science in general, you can say. Analogy means suppose you have one example in the area of, let's say, optics, that is light optics. Then if you have a similar situation in, let us say, electron optics, like in light optics, the particle is photon, and in electron optics, the particle becomes electron. And you know the difference between the two. I will talk in detail about it. Similarly, if you have an example of in classical physics, and if you have a similar situation in quantum physics, can we have a kind of similarity or analogy between the two situations, and how they are similar, how they are different? These things are, these examples are very interesting ones. I will try to make it interactive. Okay. So what I will do, I will try to make it interactive, but if somebody wants to ask any question, probably you can allow. So I will start from the first slide. Yeah. So the title of today's interaction or lecture is Analogies in Physics. Thank you for your nice introduction. I'm a professor of condensed matter physics in the Department of Applied Physics in the Faculty of Technology and Engineering of the Maharaja Sayaji Rao University of Baroda. Okay. Now, whenever somebody talks about light, then the common thing comes into our mind. Light means the particles are photons. So they are traveling, and when they travel from one medium to the other, then certain changes take place. If the two media are transparent meaning thereby that the light waves are passing or traveling in one medium and they enter the second medium. If the other medium is opaque or doesn't allow the light to pass, then there will be kind of there may be reflection, maybe absorption, whatever. But if the other medium is also allowing the light to pass, the best example we have seen even in school days, we take a glass slab and put two pins making a normal, just like shown here, and see their image in the after the slab. And similarly, we see the path in the slab, glass slab. So what happens, as you can see, that light travels from one medium to the other. In this particular figure, we can see that there are two media. One medium is shown with white background, other one is with blue. The light waves or photons are passing from first medium to the second medium, and as you can see, first medium has refractive index N1. The second medium has refractive index N2. Since that there is change in refractive index, basically the light velocity changes, and velocity changes, so the path is also changing. As you can see that in the first medium, the light is passing along one direction, making an angle alpha with the so-called normal. We call it normal, shown by dotted line here. So that angle is called angle of incidence, and since it is changing its angle, it is not traveling along the same direction. In the second medium, it is slightly bending towards the normal, again shown by dotted line, and therefore the angle is different, that is beta. This particular phenomenon in light is called refraction. You know that there are different processes or phenomena taking place, reflection, refraction, then diffraction, interference, and others. Here, it's very simple that light is traveling from one medium to the other medium, differing in the refractive index, therefore differing in their velocity. So light beam bends towards the normal, as you can see, because the second medium is denser, so called denser, or having different refractive index N2. N2 is greater than N1, meaning thereby that the refractive index is also high, the medium is denser, therefore the path is changing, and therefore the angle made by the ray is shown by red line, is different. In first medium it is alpha, in the second medium it is beta. So interaction of light with the constituent atoms of the two medium, right? Atoms, or you can say molecules of the medium, makes the light beam change its path, because the medium is different, so the beam changes its path, and this particular phenomenon is called refraction. It's a very simple one. If you have to explain to a student who doesn't know anything about refractive index, one can say that light beams will pass in the two media with different velocities, because velocities everybody is aware of. Okay. So now the relation between deflection angle, or angle of refraction also you can say, and angle of incidence is given by Snell's law. Actually, angle of deflection, what I have written, or angle of refraction, that is, it should be beta. So alpha is angle of incidence and beta is angle of refraction. This is given by Snell's law, as you know. What is that Snell's law? That is sin alpha by sin beta will be the refractive index, relative refractive index of the second medium with respect to the first medium. So angle of deflection depends upon the ratio of the refractive indices, which in turn depends upon the ratio of the velocities. As I told you, the velocities are different in the two media, therefore the refractive indices are different, and therefore the angles are different. Okay, so and that is given by Snell's law. Now the analogical situation, a similar situation of light is in there when the particle, you know that these photons are not charged, and if you have, in place of these photons, if you have, let us say, some charged particle like electrons, and they are moving from one medium to the other, naturally when we talk about the medium, now the medium becomes different. It is now no more transparent medium or semi-transparent or opaque medium. It is conducting medium. So there are two media, conducting media, 1 and 2, with they are charged to different potential. Now in place of refractive index, we talk about the potential to which these two media are charged. So first medium is charged to a potential U1, and second medium is charged to a potential U2. And second medium, just like that refractive index, the potential of the second medium U2 is higher than U1 or greater than U1. So what happens? And these two media are separated by a distance. They cannot come in contact like the optical medium or the medium in light optics, because if they come in contact of each other, both will come to same potential. There will be sharing of charges, and U1 and U2 will become equal to something like U. So the situation is that you have two conducting media in place of transparent media, two conducting media separated by a small distance. So the two conducting media have potential U1 and U2, and in place of light beam, let us say one charged particle is going, maybe electron. It is shown here as a small circle, and it is passing, it is going from first medium to the other, just like the light optics. You can see that once the potential changes, potential of the two media changes at the boundary of the two media, boundary is shown by a black line in between the two media, you can see that there is change in path. So the path is changing. It is now, so therefore, the angle is also changing. You can see that alpha is the angle of incidence in the medium 1. Angle of refraction is beta. So the electric potentials are U1 and U2, and naturally U2 is greater than U1. So as it crosses the boundary, a force perpendicular to the boundary it acts. How? You can see if a charged particle is moving in first medium, then it is moving in a direction with velocity, let us say v1. It can be resolved in two directions. One is along the normal, and the other one is actually along the tangent to the boundary. So you can see that there is change in potential only along the boundary, and not along the tangent to the boundary. Because if you draw any line parallel to boundary, the potential that will be an equipotential line, or the potential will be same. So the Vt remains the same. You can see that this component, that is the tangential component Vt, remains the same. So what changes? Actually, the normal, the force which is normal, or V1n, n stands for normal, the component of V1 along the normal, that is V1n, it in the second medium it becomes V2n, meaning thereby that this is not same, and in fact V2n is higher. So whenever some component increases, the resultant bends towards that particular component. Tangential component Vt does not change, because whenever you draw any line, the potential will be same. It changes only along the direction of change of potential, and change of potential is perpendicular to the boundary or along the normal. So V1n will not be equal to V2n. Therefore, you can see that this particular phenomenon of refraction in the case of a charged particle, when there are two conducting plates charged to different potential U1 and U2, whenever the light beam goes from first medium to the other, it changes its direction. And this is what is similar to a situation in the case of light optics. Therefore, we can say that in the case of electron optics, the light beam is electron beam, and it changes its direction. So we can observe a phenomenon of refraction similar to that in the light optics. Now let us see what are the differences between these two phenomena. So whenever we say about light optics, first of all, what is the particle? The particle in the light optics is photon. They are photons, and therefore they belong to, or they obey Bose-Einstein statistics, because they come under the category of bosons. Whenever we talk about the electron optics, the particles are electrons and they are fermions, right? They obey Fermi-Dirac statistics, they obey Pauli's exclusion principle, and they are charged particles. So there are, as regards the phenomenon of refraction is similar, but then there are differences between the particles. The particles in one case is uncharged. In the case of electrons, it is charged. It is charged to, the electronic charge, So one thing is sure, that we are able to observe a phenomenon similar to refraction in the case of we call this electron optics if we take that charged particle as electron. So now due to the normal force, as you can see, the force which is along the normal, that is different. Why there is a change in velocity of the along the normal? Because the force acts along the direction of change of potential. You know that force is the negative gradient of potential. So whenever there will be a gradient in potential, change in potential, there will be a force, additional force. That is what is there along normal, and therefore the resultant, that is the resultant path of the electron, it shifts towards the normal. So as the force is normal to the boundary, only the normal component of the velocity changes, with the tangential component remaining same in the two regions, right? This leads to the following condition. Now, I don't know why it is not visible. Now, what will happen? We can get a law similar to Snell's. Now, first of all, the normal component changes. So force along the normal or velocity along the normal, that is V1n in first medium, is not equal to V2n. But if we talk about the velocity along the tangent, they are same, right? Therefore, if we talk about this velocity along the tangent, then we can say that Vt in the first medium is equals to Vt in the second medium. Therefore, we can say that sin I by sin R. If we talk about cos, because if you take Vt, then it will be which component? It will be the component which is along the tangent. Therefore, it will be sin alpha, right? It will be sin alpha. Whenever V1 sin alpha, Vin will be V2 sin alpha. Therefore, Vin is not same, but Vt, that is tangential component, they are same. Therefore, what will be that? That will be V1. Once Vt is same, V1 sin alpha, if we take that tangential component, will be equal to V2 sin alpha. So sin beta. So sin alpha by sin beta, if you find out, then it will be equal to V2 by V1, because V1 sin alpha is equals to V2 sin beta. So sin alpha by sin beta will be V2 by V1, and that will give you the refractive index. That will give you the refractive index. As you have seen, N2 by N1 was the refractive index in the case of electron optics. Here it will be V2 by V1, and V2 and V1 are related. This equation somehow or the other is not coming, I'm sorry. V2 and V1 will be related because V2 and V1 will be proportional to V1 will be proportional to under root U1, because the kinetic energy half mv square, that will be proportional to U1. Higher the potential of the first plate, higher will be the kinetic energy. So V1 and V2, they will be related to the potentials of U1 and U2. Since U1 and U2 are not same, therefore you will find that V2 and V1 will not be same. So this shows that the charged particle moves with different velocities in the two media. What we discussed earlier, that the simplest statement of the velocity of the refraction will be that light beams or the charged particles, they move with different velocities in the two media. So, if you assume that the velocity of particle is determined by the potential at a given point, that is, then in that case, it will be a square root of U2 by U1, because V2 will be proportional to a square root of U2, V1 will be proportional to a square root of U1, therefore they will be proportional to each other, and in a way they give you the Snell's law, a law similar to Snell's law, because Snell's law is nothing but the ratio of sin I and sin R. Here it is sin alpha by sin beta. That is a constant, and that gives you the refractive index of the second medium with respect to the first medium. Okay. So now if we compare, then in the case of light, cause of deflection of beam is change in refractive index. If you talk of charged particle, then cause for deflection of beam is change in electric potential. And Snell's law, I told you, sin I by sin R or sin alpha by sin beta, if you say, in both the cases, that is N2 by N1 in first case, that is the ratio of the refractive index of the second medium to the first medium. We also call it 1 and 2. That is the direction of propagation of light is from first medium to the other. Similarly, Snell's law, if you talk about in the charged particles case, then it will be sin alpha by sin beta is equals to a square root of U2 by U1, where U2 and U1 are the potentials to which the two plates are charged. You can see a demarcation between the two media in the case of charged particle, because that is not actually, this demarcation shows that the two plates are charged and they are very close to each other, but they will not touch. If they touch just like light medium or transparent medium, then there will be sharing of charge and they will come to the same potential. So U2 will become equal to U1. So these are the points of comparison between light optics and electron optics, I can say. Okay. So this was the analogy between light optics and electron optics. Yeah. Just a minute. Let me check if we get a figure. Yeah, we are getting. We are getting, so no problem. So this is first analogy which I discussed. Now coming to the energy states and energy levels. You know that in classical or Newtonian mechanics, it describes behavior of bulk matter. If you talk about classical mechanics or Newtonian mechanics, we talk about bulk matter. If you go to microscopic level, then quantum mechanics has to be used. Now, quantum mechanics, if you talk about the basic difference, one of the important difference between classical and quantum mechanics is that in classical mechanics, all the energy levels are possible, all the energies are possible. So you can say that the energies is continuous. Energy is continuous in classical mechanics or Newtonian mechanics also we call it. But if you talk about quantum mechanics, then the energy levels are not continuous. They are discrete, and most of the time, in general, they are integral multiple of what we call the quantum of energy, that is h nu. So this is the difference. Now coming to one very simple example, particle can exist only in a state with a specified energy in classical mechanics, but in quantum mechanics, energy is, in short, energy is quantized. Okay, so quantum mechanics, if you deal with quantum mechanics, you have to solve the so-called very famous Schrodinger's equation. You have time dependent or time independent, both sorts of. In many problems, in many problems, Schrodinger's equation is analogous to wave equation obtained from classical phenomena, that is waves. You can have classical examples of waves and classical wave equation, but it is analogous to the Schrodinger equation in the case of quantum mechanics. For example, wave equation can be used to describe propagation of waves in stressed strings fixed at both ends. So I will show you. This is a string which is stretched, fixed at both ends. So with the help of this particular example of the stretched string, vibration modes of a stretched string can be used to understand energy states and energy levels. Okay, so basically, you can say that we have seen these are the possibilities. The two ends are fixed and the stretched string is there. You can see that all possibilities are there. You can see that all possibilities are there. Okay. You can have different. You can see this type of standing waves may be formed. You can have definite number of loops, and accordingly, you can see that we are discussing here three possible stationary waves in a vibrating stretched string. We call it stationary waves or standing waves. What are the possibilities? The possibilities are, simplest one, the first case, you will have nodes at the two ends. You will have nodes at the two ends. I hope you understand what are nodes. Nodes are point of no displacement, and your maximum displacement in the middle. That is, so you have antinodes in the middle. That is first possibility. You can have, in place of one loop, you can have two loops. Then you will have a node in between also, and two antinodes. A stands for antinodes, N for nodes. Similarly, you can have three loops and so on. So three possible stationary waves in a vibrating string. We will discuss. Let us see. Okay. So in such a wave, what are the energy states and energy levels that we'll see? they will be, one thing is sure, you have integral number of nodes or antinodes in a steady state vibration. Such vibration, you can see that you have the number in the first case, antinode is 1 and nodes are 2. In the second one, there are 3 nodes but 2 antinodes. In the last one, you have 4 nodes and 3 antinodes. So they are integral multiple actually, right? They are integers actually. Okay. So distance between successive modes or antinodes is 1/2 wavelength. So you can see that in the case of first one, it is 1/2 wavelength, right? Similarly, you can have this is equal to 1 wavelength, like that. So you can see that in the first case, the distance between the 2 fixed ends L will be equal to 1/2 wavelength. In the second case, distance between the 2 fixed ends, that is again it is fixed, so it will be L, that is equal to wavelength. Similarly, you can see what is the wavelength in the third case. We will discuss it. So in general, n is an integer and can have one of the values, either 1, 2, 3 or 4. Okay, so the question is how a stationary wave is formed. There is a stationary wave. Actually, there are 2 traveling waves in opposite directions and they form a standing wave or stationary wave. This is analogous to motion of particles freely moving back and forth in a straight line and making elastic collisions at 2 points separated by a distance L. So this is the analogy that you can have a particle in a box and there are 2 ends. So particle is moving freely in between the 2 walls and colliding with the walls, and this way this is analogous to that phenomenon. Okay, so quantum mechanically, a stationary Schrodinger wave is exactly equivalent to such a particle. So wavelength lambda of the Schrodinger wave is related to momentum p of the particle through, actually this equation has not come. There is a famous equation. What is that? That is given by de Broglie, and that is lambda is equals to h by p. So what is the speciality of this equation? Normally, whenever we write an equation, whatever is the nature of the quantity on left side, right hand side will have the same nature. But if you look at the beauty of this expression, lambda is equals to h by p. What is lambda? Lambda is wavelength, h is Planck's, and p is basically momentum, mass into linear velocity. So you can see that on the left hand side you have lambda, that is wavelength, that depicts the wave nature of matter. If you go to right hand side, let us treat h as constant. What about p? P is linear momentum, and that represents the particle nature of matter. So what you have? You have an equation that is the de Broglie relation. On the left hand side, the nature of the particle is wave nature, and on the right hand side, the nature is particle nature. So that is the uniqueness of this particular equation given by de Broglie. I'm sorry, these equations are not coming, but I'm going slow so that these equations are very famous. Most of you are familiar with it. So, okay, now what to do? Anyway, lambda is equals to h by p, that I told you. After that, as the wavelength can assume only discrete values, momentum of the particle is also discretized. You know that lambda here, I have shown that those equations are coming or not coming. Yeah. In these cases, everywhere you can see that. Just a minute. In the case of first one, the lambda is equals to half L. Sorry, L is equals to half L, because wavelength will consist of this one loop and one more. In the case of second case, L is equals to lambda, because you have one complete wave, whether that is you have two antinodes and in node in between. So L is equals to lambda. So as you can see, if we talk about lambda, in the first case lambda is equals to half L, in the second case lambda is equals to L. In the same way, lambda is equals to in the third case, lambda will be equal to 2 by 3L, right? So this way, what we can do, we can appreciate that these stationary waves, they can give you an idea about the quantization of energy, and this way you can see that the kinetic energy of a particle with mass m, speed v, and momentum p is equals to mb is quantized, and momentum is quantized, then energy is also quantized because they are related. So the values of nx, ny, nz define the state of a particle, and these energies correspond to the different N2 that are possible energy levels. So you can see that in the case of light optics, in the case of charged particle, we have V1 sine alpha, that is the tangential component, that is of velocity Vt. In the first medium is equal to the tangential component of the velocity in the second medium, that is V1 sine alpha is equals to V2 sine beta. So you get an equation similar to Snell's equation, that is sine alpha is equals to, why they are equal? Because there is no change in tangential velocity, because whenever you go parallel to the boundary, potential will not change, it will remain the same. So anywhere you take, that velocity component will remain same, and that velocity component, that is the tangential one Vt, is given by V1 sine alpha in first medium and V2 sine alpha in second medium. So they are equal. Once they are equal, you can write V sine alpha by sine beta is equals to V2 by V1. This equation, if you look at this, ऐसा लगता है ऐसा देखा है. So देखा है तो कहाँ देखा है? Light optics में you have seen, and that is nothing but the sign of the angle of incidence and the angle of refraction. They are equal to the velocities in the two medium, the V2 and V2 divided by V1. So if you look at the velocities, there is a relation between velocity and potential. And what is that relation? The relation is half mv square, that is the kinetic energy, is equals to the charge. Let us call it E or Q, whatever you feel like. It can be any charged particle, maybe electron. So half mv square will be equal to Qu. In short, half is constant, m is constant, and therefore, and Q is constant, the charge and mass, they are constant. Therefore, your V square will be proportional to U. So V is proportional to U. Therefore, you get an equation similar to Snell's law, square root of U2 by U1. You know the potentials U1 and U2 to which these two plates are charged. So you can see that in charged case of charged particle, if you compare now between light and charged particle, you get Snell's law in the two cases. And the Snell's law is ratio of the sign of the angle of incidence and refraction, and U2 by U1. But these are the potentials in the electron optics. Now the second example I had given about energy states and energy levels, we have already discussed this, and we have already said that these waves can be of any any type. Now this is not playing, so it will not play because it is PDF. Now coming to the equations now. If you look at the first case, that is when there is one antinode in the middle and nodes at the two fixed ends, then what is the wavelength? This L is equals to half of wavelength. Therefore, in the first case, lambda 1 is the wavelength, that will be equal to, you can say 1 by 1, just to have a kind of feeling, the quantization. So 1 by 1 into 2L, that is wavelength will be 2 times L. If you look at the second case, then it will be 1 by 2 into 2L, right? That is, it is equal to L, wavelength is equal to L, which you can write in the form of 1 by 2 into 2L. Similarly, for the third case, which I said 2 by 3, so it is 1 by 3 into 2L. In other words, if you talk about wavelength, it is equals to 1 by n into 2L. So, you can see this will lead to the quantization. How it will lead to quantization, that I am explaining to you. Yeah, you see this lambda n is equals to 1 by n. In the first case, n was 1. In the second case, n was 2. So n is basically an integer. It can be 1, 2, 3, or 4. So, and this is about the stationary waves, how they are formed. We have discussed it. Now, coming to the de Broglie relation, which I discussed, that P is equals to h by lambda. Either you say this or lambda is equals to h by P. Now, if we use P is equals to h by lambda, then as the wavelength can assume only discrete values, you can see here that it can only have n times or nj times whatever h by 2l, where nj is an integer or n is an integer. It can be nx, and you can write px, py, pz. They are maybe somewhat x, y, and z components of linear momentum. So they are quantized, you can see. Or each set of quantum numbers represents a certain direction of momentum. Momentum is a vector quantity. So Pn is the resultant momentum with a set of quantum numbers. Any momentum or any velocity, you can resolve it along three directions, x, y, and z. And therefore, the resultant momentum will be P, let us say Pj square, P, that is equal to Px square plus Py square plus Pz square. So if we let nx square plus ny square plus nz square is equals to n square, in that case, Pj square will be equal to nj square h square by 4l square. So we talked about momentum. Similarly, kinetic energy of a particle, is given by half mv square, which you can also write in the terms of momentum, linear momentum, that is equals to p square by 2l. Therefore, once you have quantization of momentum, momentum is quantized, energy as it is related to the linear momentum, epsilon is related to p, therefore epsilon j will be equal to pj square by 2m, and as pj is quantized, that is nj square into h square by 8 ml square, therefore h being constant, m being constant, l being constant, this will be a function of nj square. Therefore, we can say that classically we can have all energies which are possible, which is shown here by blue line, but quantum mechanically all energies are not possible. Only energies which are discrete 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is shown by the red steps, they are possible. So this actually a very simple example of vibration of a stressed string fixed at two ends shows you the quantization of energy. Now, if we go in detail, then energy states and energy levels, you know that values of nx, ny, and nz, they define the state of a particle and the energies corresponding to different nj are the possible energy levels. Energy depends on the magnitude of momentum, same as in classical mechanics, means number of different states corresponding to different directions of the momentum will have same energy. So if we say that there are different directions of linear momentum, then they will have, and they may have same energy. So this is what is called degeneracy. Now, if we talk about energy states and energy levels further, the lowest energy state, that is J is equals to 1. It is 1 when nx is 1, ny is 1, and nj is 1, because then that is the lowest energy. So you will have nj square is equals to nj square, which will be equal to 3. Then in that case, it is equal to 3. So what is the final formula? If you can write length of this in terms of volume, in the case of box, there is only one state, one set of quantum numbers having this energy. That is the lowest energy is non-degenerate. there is only one set of only one one state, and therefore if only there is only one state, we call it non-degenerate state. So the lowest level is therefore non-degenerate, and degeneracy is represented by J. So G1 will be equal to 1. That is the lowest energy is the degeneracy is 1. It means it is non-degenerate state. The corresponding momentum P1 are all equal, and each equal to h by 2L. So you can see that is represented in terms of degeneracy is represented, and that is represented in terms of energy levels. So we started with waves and reached the picture of quantization and degeneracy. Yeah. So this is what I mean to say, that we have taken the case of a standing wave in a string, and we have discussed the quantization of energy, or we have reached to quantization of energy and also the degeneracy. So you can see that the analogical situations in classical mechanics can lead to so many good things, or so many things which are well defined in the case of quantum mechanics. Okay. So this was, again, the first one was the analogy between light optics and electron optics. The second one, we started from the classical mechanics and talked about degeneracy and the quantum mechanics. In the same way, there is an analogy. Here we talk about entropy. Now, entropy is a measure of the number of possible microstates, that is W. In statistical physics, we talk about entropy, and S is the entropy is denoted by S. That is equal to KB ln W. There are different possible macrostates. Once those macrostates changes, distribution changes, the whole of the mechanics energy states, and they will lead to different entropy. This particular equation is very famous equation given by Boltzmann, and it provides the relationship between entropy and the number of ways the atoms or molecules. Basically, this particular equation is very famous equation. This equation was given by Boltzmann, and the constant Kb or K, whatever you call, this is the equation for which Boltzmann could not get recognition throughout his lifetime. So his wish was to engrave this equation on his gravestone. Therefore, it is engraved on his gravestone, this particular equation. So this is a very famous equation, which in fact relates entropy with the distribution of the particles among various energy levels. This was the formula proposed by Boltzmann between this time, the 1872 to 1875, in kinetic theory of gases, later put into current form by Max Planck. So W can be computed, using this formula of permutations. Where W is sometimes called the thermodynamic probability, since it is an integer greater than 1. While mathematical probabilities are numbers between, this can be more than 1. So we call it thermodynamic probability. Normally, you know that mathematically any probability should be between 0 and 1 and not more than 1. Therefore, to be more precise, this is called thermodynamic probability, which is nothing but it depends on the distribution of the particles among various energy levels. While teaching to the students of B.Arch, that is Bachelor of Architecture, I used to take one class on architectural acoustics. I came across a similar equation, which is basically relating loudness with intensity. Loudness with intensity. So loudness L, that is in decibel, is equals to 10 times log of I by I0, where I is sound intensity, watt per meter square, I0 is reference intensity or threshold of hearing. Actually, there is 1 picowatt per meter square. This is actually reference. the threshold of hearing, that if the intensity is below that, you cannot listen. So this equation is similar to the Boltzmann's equation. Only thing is that these again, these two quantities, intensity and loudness, they are different. Loudness L is a subjective quantity, whereas intensity is an objective quantity. Intensity of sound can be, it has to be precise, and it has a precise value, and it will be same for all. Therefore, it is an objective quantity, whereas the loudness, actually it should be a constant, right? So anyway, that constant it might have cut, but this is proportional. Loudness is proportional to log of I, meaning thereby that, and then there will be a constant. That constant is, there is a K also. That constant actually is not any universal constant, because intensity may be same for all, or the ratio of intensity may be same for all, but the loudness is different, because it depends on the sensitivity of the ear of a particular person. Therefore, these two quantities, they are different in nature. Intensity is objective, and it has a precise value, whereas loudness varies from person to person. So these two equations are again similar. One is the equation given in the area of thermodynamics, other is the equation given in the area of sound. Okay, so if you talk about light, apparent magnitude of a star tells how intense the star appears through a telescope. Again, this is a similar equation in light. M, which is apparent magnitude, is equals to 2.5 log I by I0. Again, I0 is reference intensity, and I is the intensity of light measured in watt per meter square. Okay, so these were some of the similar things, or some of the analogical situations which I discussed. Now, coming to stress strain and force acceleration ratio, right? This is the first one, as you can see, gives you the curve of stress and strain. You can see that on x-axis you have a strain, and on y-axis you have a stress. It is linear up to certain value, and after that strain hardening takes place, then necking and breaking, fracture. So all of us know that stress is proportional to strain in the elastic limit. That is, the linear portion represents the elastic limit, and the constant, there is a constant. That constant is given by the ratio of stress and strain. Okay, so you can see that why stress is always on x-axis and strain is on the x-axis and stress on the y-axis. Normally, we learn from basic mathematics that whenever we say y is equals to mx, that is stress here, stress is equals to elastic constant into strain, then y is dependent variable and x is independent variable. If we say a stress is proportional to a strain, a stress is equals to some constant, elastic constant, into a strain, then हेलो हेलो ओके, कोई बात कर रहे हैं उनको म्यूट कर दीजिएगा. ओके, हेलो, या. So on x-axis you have a strain, and on y-axis you have a stress, meaning thereby a strain is an independent quantity and a stress is dependent quantity. But from our normal experience, it appears that if we stretch a string, its length increases, and therefore the stress is independent and a strain is dependent. But here from this curve, it is clear that a strain is independent and a stress is independent. That is, whenever there is change in dimension, there is change in force per unit, or there is force per unit area applied. Why is it so? It is so because when we apply a force per unit area, that is a stress, there is change in length, but a strain which we talk about is not the change, that is the change in length per unit length, but the stress which we are talking about we are not talking about externally applied force per unit area. It is actually the force per unit area which is developed inside the material as a result of the reaction to the stress applied from outside. So basically, it's the force per unit area which is the stress, and this is opposite to the externally applied stress, and that is the actual stress. Therefore, we can say that strain is independent variable and stress is dependent variable, and in fact this gives the elastic property of the material because this stress is developed inside the material, and that is equal to the externally applied force per unit area, because we know from Newton's law that for every action has its equal and opposite reaction. So the stress which is created inside the material, that is of course as a result of the externally applied force per unit area and equal to it, but the stress which we are talking about in the case of elasticity it is not the externally applied force per unit area, it is the stress which is created inside the material as a result of the reaction to the externally applied force per unit area or stress. So this is all about a stress strain curve. Actually it goes to Wikipedia, so that you can click and you can get. वापस जाऊं क्या करूं? Coming to the similar situation, you can see that this is force of action and reaction. You know that these two persons, let us say, they are trying to push each other, or they can also try to pull each other. In that case, what happens? If every action has its equal and opposite reaction, then or you can say force is equal to mass into area. Now if somebody is trying to push the other person, he or she will also try to push, and the force of action and reaction will be same. In fact it is same, but what happens that force is equal to mass into acceleration. The force of action and reaction are same, but the masses, if masses are different, then the one with light mass will have larger acceleration, and therefore that particular person will be pushed. So this is again about force of action and reaction. In fact, this relation clearly shows that if the force is same, then that particular body or person will move with a larger acceleration, which has lesser mass. Now coming to again similar situations like electricity and gravity, you can see that the electrostatic force between two charges when they are similar in nature, Q1 and Q2, if both are positive, then there is force of repulsion, and if they are negative, because of the charge, there is force of attraction and force of repulsion. So you can see in the first case it is force of repulsion. In the second case, when the other charge is negative, minus Q2, it is force of attraction. But the force is given by same equation, that is K into Q1 Q2 by R square, right? So this is similar situation is this is about charge. If you go to a gravitational force of attraction, it is always attraction. That force is equals to F1 is equals to F2. That is same as G is universal gas gravitational constant. So G into M1 M2 is mass here. Here Q1 Q2 was charge. Now another similar situation. It's a crude analogy, but I find it very interesting one. You can see that if you look at the interatomic potential, then it looks like the curve which I have shown, the blue curve. What happens if there is an atom at the origin and another atom is, let us say, it is coming in the vicinity of the first atom? Short term, there is repulsion, which is shown by on the positive direction. Then if you increase the distance, then what happens that there is an equilibrium distance where the force of attraction and force of repulsion, they become equal. If you talk about force, if you talk about potential energy, then actually it is shown in the form of potential energy. This is a Lennard zone potential. So potential energy in the minima shows the point of inflection, meaning thereby the force goes from repulsive to attractive. Up to the equilibrium distance, it is repulsive, and point of inflection, there is no net force. That is the force of attraction is equals to force of repulsion, and that is the equilibrium. We call it the equilibrium distance. Once it becomes greater than that equilibrium distance, force of attraction comes into the picture, because you can see that now the slope becomes positive. So F is equals to minus du by dx. Therefore, the force becomes attractive, and force goes from positive to negative. Positive force means it is repulsive energy. Negative means it is attractive energy. Now, if you want to have a feel of this particular interatomic force, short-term repulsive, long-term attractive. In village age, normally we used to keep ourselves hot in winter season by sitting near the fire. You can see there are 5-6 persons sitting near the fire, and they are keeping their hands at different distances. Somebody is keeping very close, somebody is keeping farther, somebody is keeping still farther, one still closer. Now, this situation is analogical to the force or the potential energy which I talked about, that it is short-term repulsive, meaning thereby if I put my hands at some distance where I feel comfortable, if I try to push it inside the fire, there is a very quick sensation of burning. That is, then we again bring it back. But if we take, so that is that repulsive force, similar to repulsive force. If we try to take it away from that distance where we feel comfortable, we start feeling cold. Then we bring it again back to the same position. So the position at which we feel comfortable can be compared to the equilibrium distance, where there is neither force of repulsion nor force of attraction. Okay. Then, in the same way, here this fire which is shown here. So I hope you enjoy this particular slide, where a crude example of persons sitting near the fire, and why they are keeping it at different distances. Because if you look at this potential energy curve or the force with distance curve, for different atoms of different elements, the equilibrium distance is different. Therefore, just like that, depending on the physiology of a person, this the distance at which they feel comfortable is different for different persons. So, although this analogy is crude, but I think very easy to compare and understand. Yeah. Okay. Now, coming to the equilibrium, I talked about equilibrium. Now, if you look at this particular example of people sitting near the fire or the Lennard zone potential, the crystal structure also gives such a feeling. If you talk about any crystal structure, then the spring model gives you an idea that two atoms, they sit at certain lattice sites just because they cannot coalesce, they cannot fall on each other, because the force between them short term is repulsive, so and long term it is attractive. So it appears as if they are connected by a spring. So that is called a spring model also. So if you try to push it, it will come back to its original position. If you try to stretch it again and leave it, it will come back to that same equilibrium position. So basically the crystal structure is also there due to that spring force. We also represent it maybe by single equation F is equals to minus kx. Why I have shown this electromagnetic induction? Because in the case of such situations, here you don't have any equilibrium. If you keep the magnet at one place, then there is no EMF induced. Only if you keep the magnet moving towards the coil, whether south pole or north pole, then only you have the EMF induced. So this is basically a dynamic phenomenon. Whenever a phenomenon is dynamic, which depends on the change, that is here the flux is changing. If you keep it stationary at one place, the flux, that is the number of lines of force or lines of forces passing through the coil, doesn't change. There is no EMF which is induced. So here, although it's it may be an analogical situation, but you cannot talk of equilibrium because there is no equilibrium, because basically it's a dynamic phenomenon, and therefore electromagnetic induction has a different kind of illustration, which I have tried to illustrate to you by some small video, right? So I think this is all about the analogy which I wanted to talk to you. Now I feel you can open it for questions or discussions. A similar situation, but in a different field. Okay, so that is what I explained. I understand that there are few things. Why I have tried to put up these things, because now also I went to an interview. I appeared at an interview. Somebody asked me, how will you explain refraction to a student who doesn't know anything about refractive index? So then, and I could not answer properly, but he gave me the answer that the photons move with different velocities. Velocity everybody knows.
Yes,
so
yes.
Basically, and then there are few differences also. They are not similar. In the first case, there are two media which are refracting. They can pass the light. And in the second case, these are two conducting plates which are charged to different potentials, U1 and U2. So what is the difference and what is the similarity? That is what I tried to discuss. Okay.
Sir, can you please one more example of analogy in nuclear physics?
In nuclear physics?
Yes, sir.
Well, I have not discussed anything about nuclear physics, but yeah, I will give you the application of quantum mechanics in nuclear physics using the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle.
Yes, sir.
I hope you know Heisenberg's uncertainty principle.
Yes, yes.
It is the basic law. You can prove that inside the nucleus there are no electrons.
Yes, yes.
Right?
Yes, sir.
Another example of again application of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle can be benzene structure. Do you know that?
Which structure, sir?
Benzene, a structure of benzene.
Okay, okay.
How it is explained that you know the benzene ring structure.
Yes, but not much now. In 12th we have studied.
I will tell you. It's very basic. You know about the double bond. It is not localized. Yeah. It is called delocalized double bond, and therefore that double bond is shown by a ring or circle.
Yes. Yes.
Why double bond is delocalized? Because that delocalization gives rise to maximum uncertainty in position. That is delta x.
Oh, okay.
Due to that, there is minimum uncertainty in linear momentum.
Okay.
And therefore, energy is optimized and energy is minimum, and that gives the stability to the benzene ring.
First of all, congratulations, sir. And thank you for your valuable time for this online faculty development program on physics. It was a wonderful session, sir.